And you mentioned phosphatidylcholine. Do you want to talk about that for a minute? Because I think that is such a critically important element to our diets, and that it's so important that we take it in. And when people throw egg yolks out, I want to scream. And
You have
I want to
people.
explain to the audience why that is.
It's people are removing. There's such a myopic view on linoleic acid that they're removing things like egg yolks, thinking that you're decreasing your linoleic acid intake, and so you're getting less phospholipids, phosphatidylcholine. Eggs are one of the main sources. Things like soy are other sources, meats even. But they're demyelinating. You're removing so much that you're actually reversing your health. And so this kind of myopic view of omega-6 is a whole different conversation. But to
Right.
focus on phosphatidylcholine, it's a critically important fat, essentially an oil, if you will, because fats are going to be solid. It's a bioactive lipid. It's this beautiful part of the cell membrane that we synthesize in our bodies from food. We typically start to lose the ability to synthesize it from food as we age. And it's critically important to our cellular health. So if the majority of the outside of your cell membrane starts to kind of deteriorate, that not only affects your cells, but it affects all the organelles within the cells, like the mitochondria.
Yes, yes. And the cell is my undergrad focus really was on cell biology, and
Mm,
it's such a intricate world in there. And
yeah.
we need these fatty acids, these appropriate fatty acids for all of it to work, for all of it to flow. And like you said, when we're ingesting a bunch of this whole generation has been basically raised up on crappy fats, and it makes those cells so rigid.
Yeah.
And we are in my I mean, everyone says we're made of proteins, and I'm like, yeah, but we function on fats. Like
Absolutely. So,
that's
and
how the
especially the
signal,
brain.
yeah, and all the signaling and the G proteins inside just for the audience to understand, that phospholipid bilayer is just chock full of receptors and
Mhm.
channels, and all of those receptors and channels work best and only really appropriately when the appropriate fatty acids are made available. So otherwise things just kind of go to hell in a handbasket.
The other thing that can happen that's really interesting is toxins can affect the location of those channels and those receptor sites and the composition of the phospholipids within both the cell membrane and like the mitochondrial membrane. And so toxins will literally attach, like currently I'm dealing with mold in my HVAC. So these toxins, these different molds will then also grab onto things like heavy metals, and they attach themselves to our nuclear and mitochondrial DNA, and they create these DNA adducts. And what PC and balance oil and butyrate works as an HGAC inhibitor, but it also works as a chemical chaperone to kind of break down these toxins. But it's really those products together that optimize our neurometabolic and cellular health to detoxify these things. So they're not sticking to our DNA, because everything, I mean, the testing that I'm doing recently, triclosan, every single car exhaust fumes. I mean, it picks up everything. And it's not like I'm
Wow.
working on old cars or using hand sanitizer all the time. So these things stick to our DNA and they affect us at that epigenetic level. And I think there's so much interesting research going on, particularly in the functional and integrative space, on how these things then trigger disease and disease at younger states.
Absolutely. And you can't fix anything. I mean, you can take all the fancy things in the world and you can't fix anything unless that cell membrane is signaling and working appropriately and channeling correctly and all of that jazz. So I really do think it is ground zero for folks who, especially the folks who like, I've done everything. And it's like, yeah,
And I'm still not feeling well. Yeah.
we still have this weird, even in the functional medicine space and in the naturopathic world, we still have this sort of like kill the offending things, detox the offending things, which I get, but like, how about we avoid the offending things as best we can? And like you and I were talking offline, it's just unavoidable in our current world. I mean, a lot of these toxins are just there. It's just inherent to, we live in a toxic soup is what I call it. Like the planet has turned into a big bowl of toxic soup, and
Yeah.
each individual has their sort of toxic bucket load they have, filled. And while we can try as hard as we can to avoid as much of these things, And certainly getting rid of the hand sanitizers and the overt offenders. But then there's just this sort of rebuild that we got to do. And I think that's where John has really like evangelized me to understand your your product line around this, because I'm not seeing anyone else talk about this.
It's
Really.
about nourishing. And I don't think we talk about that enough in
Yeah.
this field, right? I think when people are dealing with chronic illness, or dealing with Lyme or mold toxicity, or something just really, and they're really ill and they're in a state of cell danger response and chronic inflammatory response syndrome, it to just kill and remove it, there needs to be the element of nourishing at that foundational cellular level.
Yeah, yeah. We were talking about that offline as well before, you and I. This idea that we're going to get into postbiotics and sodium butyrate, but people want to, first they want to dial in their diet, which is of course step one and very critically important. Obviously looking at the environment we live in and the homes we live in and the places we live, but there's only so much we can do about that often.
Yeah.
I just tested my house for mold and got back the test results, and it's not enough to start ripping walls out, but there's something there, right? So, and I live in Oregon. I mean, come on, it rains all the time and it's like everything molds eventually around here. And then it's a matter of, to me, I've always tried to talk to patients. I'm not as concerned about killing everything off and removing everything as I am making the individual more resilient so that they can withstand these onslaughts. And that's the name of the game, in my opinion. So I think cellular health is a keystone to that. We've got and mitochondrial health and the mitochondrial membrane health. That's the way to get through this, because we can't always control what we're going to get hit with and where we're going to be. And that's the best we can do, is build a robust system inside.
Exactly. Yeah. That's really the approach. I mean, it's the approach for adults. It's the approach for children. That is the body bio protocol in essence.
I love it.